What's up, everybody? Thanks for listening to the Whatcast. Yes, I still sound sick. I no longer have COVID, but I have given up all hope on the symptoms going away ever again in my life.
Did you have any issues with taste or smell?
I did.
Did it change for you, or did you lose it?
It changed, but for me, it was no more than having like a bad head cold and not being able to smell things because of congestion. It wasn't so much that I actually lost the sense of smell or taste. It seemed like that more, you know?
I had a really weird, like, and I've heard of people that would like lose their taste, like they couldn't taste anything or they couldn't smell anything. Or the taste would be like dulled, like they can't really taste it. But I had this weird, almost everything that I ate tasted like, a mix between something that's severely burned and the way fertilizer smells.
Whoa.
So like a combination of those two. That's what everything tasted like, except for homemade chocolate chip cookies and frozen, a very specific brand of frozen pizza.
Wow.
Yeah. Everything else, I couldn't eat anything if it wasn't chocolate chip cookies that were homemade or frozen pizza. I couldn't eat it. And I remember I was feeling better, and I was so pumped to finally eat something. So I ordered takeout, and we got it. So excited to eat it. I started to eat it. Literally every single thing tasted like that still, even after I thought that was going to be my life. It took me a couple of weeks to get that taste, my regular taste back. Wow. Yeah. It didn't affect my smell as much, but my girlfriend loves to wear like Nag Champa and patchouli. And for some reason, those also smelled like something burning to me. And I usually really like those scents, but it just smelled like something burning. I don't know what the deal was. It was weird.
That's gnarly, dude. Well, you guys may have noticed an ad at the start of this episode. And
Boo, hiss.
I know that we had put ads, or said we were going to put ads at the start of our show a while ago. And you may have noticed that those have disappeared, except for one, like at the end of the show after everything. And we did that because we ran into problems with the ad stuff. I don't know if you guys remember, we woke up one day to having the maximum amount of ads stuffed into our show. That was like sometimes 17 ads in one episode. It was absolutely ridiculous. But we ended up just reaching out to them and trying to get that fixed. And it was pretty much left to us. But so we just pretty much took them out and put one at the end. And I've gotten away with that for about like a year and a half, I'd say. You think so, Mike?
Yeah, around there.
Well, they've caught me. We got an email asking why we weren't putting ads in the show, and the person who published the show is actually a sponsor, and they've always been good to us. And the email worded things like breach of contract and stuff like that. So we have to put ads back in the show. I'll keep them to a minimum. I don't know what the back catalog of the show looks like. I think I'm going to manually have to go back to every episode we have, which is what I wanted to avoid, but I'd rather do that than have episodes that have 9 fucking commercials in it, 12 commercials.
Fucking capitalism.
Yeah. The good news is if that doesn't work out the way we wanted to, we reached an agreement to where we can basically downgrade what plan we're on with our publisher, and then we have free reign to do whatever we want with the ads. There's some tricky things going on with the ad stuff and the ad revenue. The ad revenue took a huge hit, but it was like a 80% loss in what they paid people for having ads, and it just wasn't worth it. So I tried to hide that one ad at the end for you guys for as long as I could. But they they finally caught on to me. I was so shocked. They're like, "Hey, we noticed you don't have ads here or here or here, and haven't for the past year or so." When I hear stuff like a breach of agreement and contract, I know I wish I can keep the show ad free, but those are big words when it comes to being a big boy and dealing with our show and shit.
And now you know.
But you can always join the Patreon or the Ko-Fi, where we have the shows ad free. We're gonna work on getting them out like maybe a week early too. There's the Hangouts, bunch of cool stuff, bonus episodes. We usually put out 2 a month. So there's a few benefits too if you want to have the ad-free shows. If you can't press the skip button twice, if that's going to kill you.
The skip button equals death.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry I got busted not putting ads on a show. There's a requirement to be on the publisher's roll call there. So we have to have a minimum amount of ads. If it doesn't work out, like I said, we'll switch to a different plan to we'll go back to the one ad at the end. But now that that's out of the way, Mike, what are we going to talk about?
Tonight we'll dig up a old case from Unsolved Mysteries.
Yes, dude, yes.
We'll talk about the case as it was presented first. But I've got some issues with this case. And as cool as it is, maybe it's not as cool.
You have some unsolved issues.
Yeah. This is Unresolved Mysteries, not Unsolved Mysteries. So, for anyone who is an avid watcher of Unsolved Mysteries, you may be familiar with the story of the Allagash Abduction encounter, or however you want to word it, incident, experience, whatever. But to start with, it's one that wasn't even reported until like 12 years after the incident was alleged to have taken place. And the whole reason it ended up getting reported at all was because 2 of the men involved started having these nightmares, and the nightmares kind of started leading them to these memories that they had repressed, and then they started to remember stuff about the experience. So we start in 1988, where a man named...
Oh, I'm excited.
I'm sorry. We should act our age here. But a man named Jack Weiner was having recurring nightmares, and he didn't tell anyone about these nightmares except for his wife. And the nightmares, they would frequently replay this scene where he was in a brightly lit room, and he was very confused why he was there or even where he was. And to his left, he would see his brother Jim, his friend Chuck, and his other friend Charlie. And they were all sitting on this bench, and all 4 of them were completely naked. And he was looking at them wondering why they weren't helping him, because he felt like he was panicking and like he was in danger. And so, while he's trying to kind of make sense of his whole situation, he notices what he describes as a dark figure, or a dark shadowy type figure emerging from this light that he sees in front of him. And then all of a sudden he would wake up, and he would just be in this, basically state of panic, and just coming out of this vivid nightmare. But he ended up talking to his twin brother Jim, and he found out that Jim was having the same nightmares. And they would have this reoccurring, these reoccurring elements would appear in the dreams. There would always be this weird dark figure. They would always get the sense that they were helpless. And then when they woke up, they would have this feeling like they had been violated.
Yikes.
And both of the twins in these dreams, they both had their friend Charlie and Chuck with them in the, whatever the place that they were in. And so they started to kind of talk amongst themselves about this, and they thought that maybe these nightmares were connected to a camping trip they went on 12 years earlier in Maine. So going back to August 1976, all four men, Jim and Jack Weiner, Charlie Foltz, and Chuck Rack, they all went on this 2-week-long trip through the Allagash wilderness in Maine. And this area, it's like pretty much the farthest north up in the state that you can get. And it's just thousands of acres of wilderness. And they were just going, what they were doing was going in, and they would camp for the night, and then they would either hike or canoe to the next campsite, camp for the night, and so on and so forth. Their second night out, Jim noticed this bright light in the sky. And the way he describes it, it was floating above the treetops, but it didn't seem to be moving in any particular direction. So he pulled out his binoculars and looked at it for, he said, maybe 15 to 30 seconds. And as he was looking at it, he said it winked out. But it winked out like it didn't just disappear. He said it looked like it went from the outside edges inward, and then it was gone. So the way I picture it, like, remember that Norway spiral? How that looked like the outside just kind of collapsed in on itself?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I picture based on this description. But he said after he witnessed it, he was left with this odd feeling that something wasn't right. But he couldn't really place it, so he didn't dwell on it, and they continued along. And the next day, no issues. They made it to the next campsite. They camped for the night. Everything was cool. And then they went on their way. The fourth day, everything was fine. They set up camp for the night, and they decided to do some night fishing. And so they built this huge bonfire, kind of like a beacon. So while they were out on their canoe, they'd be able to keep sight of where their camp was, so they can make sure that they made it back to the right area. So they're out there, about 20 minutes go by. They're out on the water. And Chuck was the first one to realize that there was something going on. He said he started getting this feeling that somebody was staring at him from behind. So he looks over his shoulder, and he sees this bright globe of light like they had seen on the second night. And this thing, they all agree to what it looks like. They said it had this kind of roiling effect to it, like picture like those the videos of the sun that you can see online, so you can like kind of see all the plasma and everything moving around on the sun's surface. He said it was kind of like that, and it was very bright. He said it lit, when it flew over the tree tops, it lit the top of the trees like daylight, but the thing itself was completely silent. And they were all looking at it for they don't really know. They kind of got lost in looking at it, didn't really realize. But they said it was probably a few seconds at least that they were just sitting there looking at it. And then for some reason, Charlie decides to try to signal it with the flashlight. So he picks up the flashlight and uses the signal for Morse code for SOS. And as soon as he did that, the light started coming right towards them.
Oh, shit.
And so Charlie instantly drops his flashlight, and he said the only thought in his head was to get to shore. So he didn't look back the entire time, and he's just rowing. Jack said that he remembers looking over his shoulder, trying to keep eye contact with the object, and it was coming up really close behind them. And it almost got to the point where it was hovering directly over them. And he remembers thinking that there was no way they were going to outrun this thing. And then the next thing they remember, they are on the shore, just looking up at this object above them. And Jim remembers thinking that this thing was so close, he'd be able to pick up a rock and throw it at it and hit it. And shortly after that, the thing just took off really fast, flew straight up, and they said within a few seconds, it looked just like any other star in the sky. It was just a light in the sky. And then Chuck remembers when they got out of the canoe, there was no like panic or excitement. They were all just very relaxed, and they walked back to the campsite. Once they got to the campsite, they realized that this huge bonfire that they had lit was now just coals. There was nothing left except coals. And to their recollection, it had only been out there 20 minutes. So this bonfire should not have burned through, or burned down completely into coals within 20 minutes time. But they remembered that the most unusual thing was that they got back to camp. Nobody discussed even seeing this thing. Nobody said anything. And they all just went to bed. And then the next day they woke up, tore down camp, and paddled downstream to the next campsite. And they spent another 10 days there and didn't see the light again. So, I mean, right there, it sounds like there might be missing time, because they remember paddling to get away from this thing, and then the next thing they remember, they're on the shore, but they don't remember getting to the shore, and the fire is burned down completely.
Right. Do you think the dreams are something to do with it as well?
Well, the dreams came, those were in 88. They didn't start having those dreams till 88. So it was like a recollection of maybe what happened during that time.
Right.
So as the years go by, the individuals involved talk to their friends and family about it, but either people didn't believe them, or they're like, okay, here's, this old story again. But it was such a weird experience that they didn't really believe it themselves. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying. I don't remember if I said it on the show or if it was in the Discord meetup, but where I was talking about seeing UFOs, and afterwards just thinking about it, like, what did I really see? And you almost get to the point where, like, oh, maybe it wasn't anything that was weird, because he can't really describe what it is. And I kind of feel like that's what happened with them, the way that they're talking about it, how they don't even really believe it, even though, you see this light that's hovering directly above you, close enough you could throw a rock at it. But then once the nightmares started, Jim and Jack reached out to a UFO researcher named Ray Fowler. And so Fowler suggested that because, they had the sighting and they had this missing time, maybe they should undergo hypnosis and try to recover details of their sighting. So the brothers undergo hypnosis, and the other two men, Charlie and Chuck, both also agree to undergo hypnosis. And when they looked at what they had all claimed to have experienced, everything was almost exactly alike. Independently, they each had their own session. They were told to draw pictures of what they saw, and all four claimed that they were taken aboard a craft, and that these gray beings forced them to strip naked and seemed to be conducting medical examinations on them. It's classic abduction stuff. The aliens took samples of their skin, their blood, their urine, their semen, all the good stuff. There's probably an anal probe going on. You know how the aliens do it. They're curious little buggers. They just want to know what's going on. Or they're sex perverts. I don't know. It's one of the two. I'm going for curious buggers and not sex perverts, but I've never met one, so I don't know. But when they were going through the sessions, they were kind of reliving their experiences again. And Jim remembers feeling like he wanted to, if he was able to get one of them, he wanted to throttle it, he said. He doesn't like them, and in his session, he said, I don't care where they come from. They shouldn't be doing this to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he just wanted to kick their asses. And then Jack reported in his session that they were talking in his head. So they weren't like actually talking to him, but they were communicating with him, telling him not to be afraid and do what they say and follow their orders, that type of thing. And then in Charlie's recollection, he said that it was like a doctor's office and it was cold. And he said they put this panel over his chest and then they scrape your arms and chest and your legs and thighs. And he said the whole time, all that he kept thinking was, I want to be back in the canoe.
Man.
And then Chuck reported or I shouldn't say reported, in his hypnotherapy session, he reported saying, seeing some sort of device on Charlie. In his recollection, he was watching what was happening to Charlie. And he said that he saw this device on him, and it was a silvery device that's kind of curved, but it looks like it's like sucking on his body. And he said Charlie's head was tipped back like it was in pain, and he's helpless to try to help him in any way. And all that they're able to do is just watch this happen to Charlie. But after they had these the hypnosis sessions, that's when they all kind of compared what they had experienced, and they were surprised to find that how similar they all were. One of the people researching, or one of the groups that was researching the case, suggested maybe they take a polygraph test to see if they're really telling the truth. So they all took the polygraph test and they all passed, just like the Walton case.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of similarities to the Walton case. It's amazing that they passed.
Yeah. But 3 out of the 4 men never backed down from the story. And they still claim that this is what happened. And that's kind of where the story with Unsolved Mystery ends. With, basically except in Unsolved Mysteries, because this was back then, they said all 4 men have never backed down. However, now with the benefit of being in the future, I can tell you that 3 of the 4 men have never backed down.
Ooh.
1 of the men has since recanted a lot of these statements.
Oh, wow.
So Chuck Rack, who he was the one who said that he had the feeling that he was being watched and saw this thing on the 4th night again. He's claiming that a lot of the story has been fabricated. And what he's claiming is that the lost time thing, where they're saying the fire burned down, they built this big bonfire and now it was coals. He's saying that's a load of malarkey. What he's saying is they had built a big fire, but most of the logs they used were maybe 3 inches in diameter, and most of them were smaller. So because they were so small, he's claiming they would have burnt quickly. I don't know if 20 minutes is enough for 3 inch in diameter. I mean, 3 inches in diameter isn't that big, but I don't think 20 minutes seems like a lot for it to be burned completely, where it was just, red coals. I don't know about that. But he also is saying that they were questioned on numerous different places. They were on the Joan Rivers show at one point. But they obviously were asked if they were under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and they all said no. Charlie at one point said that they had bought, so there are 4 of them going, and he said for the entire week we bought an 8-pack of beer, and we all had one on the first night, and then they all had one when they went to a different location. But that was it. But what Chuck is claiming is that Jack had brought some Afghan hash, and they were smoking hash on that particular night when they had seen this thing on the water. Now, as a smoker of cannabis, I can say without hesitation that no amount of smoking would ever make me see a UFO hovering directly over me.
Right.
No amount whatsoever.
Yeah, to say that hash is going to produce that is just ridiculous.
Yeah. And I don't think that's what he was saying. I just think he was using that as an example of them fluffing the story a little bit. He is saying that they did see this light, and it did, like, all of the stuff with the light. He's saying that happened. And he even goes on to say that he believes that abductions happen. He just doesn't believe that it happened to them. And he's saying all the stories of the abduction, that was all made up, and that was that. But in rebuttal to that, the other three have said that Chuck has over the years become a loose cannon, and Charlie Foltz has even gone on to say that he was a mental disaster area. They say that what he's claiming now is trying to kind of sabotage them because he's being resentful. When they were on the Joan Rivers show, they thought that, that's a big name. So Chuck started to get this idea in his head where they could start to make money. So one time Charlie was visiting Jack and his wife in Vermont. And while he was there, Chuck had showed up, and he said that he had a plan to make $1 million off of the case. And what he proposed was for that all four of them to refute the handling of the case by Ray Fowler and by MUFON, and start to create controversy about their case. And according to the way that Chuck Rack was thinking, was that this controversy was going to get the media involved in the case again and get the public interested in it, and then they would start getting paid for more interviews.
I gotta ask you, do you think that's kind of an advanced tactic there?
What, like trying to just kind of muddy the waters?
To bring attention to the case through controversy and creating problems. That to me, that doesn't sound like maybe, I mean, I'm using the right word, a civilian idea.
Yeah, to me, it just sounds like he, after getting on Joan Rivers and seeing the attention they were getting, he's like, we got to capitalize on this. We got to make money. And then controversy always sells. So, But Jack, Jim, and Charlie all, they were not on board with us at all. They said that they were disgusted with his ethics, and they decided, among the three of them, they made a unanimous decision to have no further interaction with Chuck on any of these projects. So anything involving the sightings, the abduction, any of that, he wasn't going to be involved. But apparently he came to them and apologized and claimed it was an inebriated indiscretion. So they joined back up with him again. They did some TV projects and some UFO conferences. But Chuck's behavior became what they described as being pathological. And he kept up with this whole thing, like trying to make money and do all this stuff. And they just decided they were done with him. So once that happened, that's when he started making these claims to dispute what he had previously been on board with. But according to him, he said when he was kicked out of the group, he felt like he was now at liberty to tell the truth. So because they turned their back on him, now he's like, well, I can tell the truth. So that's what he went with. But the other three all stand by the story, and they are in agreement that the event that happened was actually accurate, and they point to the fact that they passed the polygraph test, and they still stand by it to this day. But there's more. So we can just take Chuck's claim that it was mostly fabricated, and to me that reminds me of the dude who came out and claimed to be the guy in the Patterson Gimlin tape, and because he didn't get the attention or whatever. I mean it sounds like the same sort of thing. Like he's just butthurt about not being part of it. So he's like, well, it was fake all along. I don't want to be part of it.
Especially after they tried to exclude him once and then he got the boot again.
Yeah. So I mean, you could easily chalk it up to that, or you could go the other way and be like, he's just sick of the bullshit, and the other three are still interested in capitalizing on what happened.
And you said this took place in the 80s, right? The mid 80s?
The abduction took place in 76. The recollection started in 88.
That's funny because here, let me see. I'm going to check something. The Walton case was reported to have happened in 75. Now let me see something.
Of course, these guys claim to have never been interested in UFOs and were surprised that other people had experienced this sort of thing. Whether or not that's true, who's to say?
I wish I knew how much attention Travis Walton got so soon after his case. Like if these guys were if they looked back and saw that, I guess Travis Walton's made a career out of his experience. If they try to do the same thing, the he said, she said stuff with dudes getting booted, like that really muddies the water. You just got to go by people's word at that point.
Right. Well, here's something to further muddy the waters. So in 88, Jim Weiner had suffered a head injury. The head injury triggered something called temporal limbic epilepsy, which is also known as temporal lobe epilepsy. And it's a kind of epilepsy that has, in addition to unprovoked seizures, it also creates sensory changes that would accompany the seizures, like smelling odors that aren't there. And one of the other common side effects is that there's a disturbance of memory, which can either cause the person having the seizure to be unable to recall things that they normally would, or creating false memories that are either confusing or not real at all. So after Jim has this head injury, he starts to recall some of the events that night.
Ooh.
And he starts to remember seeing, once he started having the seizures, he remembers having sleep paralysis. But in the sleep paralysis scenario, he was surrounded by beings, which we've talked about before. The Shadow Man also seems to be hanging around sleep paralysis as well. So is it the cause of the sleep paralysis, or is it a symptom of it? I don't know. But in addition to this, he had recall of what happened when they got abducted. So in the initial report, I should say most reports on this, in addition to the Unsolved Mystery case or spot on it, they talk about them undergoing hypnotic regression with a trained hypnotist. But what they don't tell you is who the hypnotist was and how they had found this person. So because Jim was having these recollections, he went to a UFO convention, and hearing about hypnotic regression therapy, he actually found someone there who was a researcher but whose day job was a high school English teacher, and he was actually an amateur hypnotist. His name is Anthony Constantino. So he had an amateur hypnotist who is an admitted believer in UFOs and a UFO researcher, put all 4 of these men under hypnosis. So knowing the way that the human brain works and knowing how hypnosis works, it's very easy to see how leading questions could be used to create a false memory. And all this guy had to, he heard Jim's story, and Jim told him that his 4 friends were involved. So this guy's an amateur. He's not a doctor. He's an English teacher who has a hobby as a hypnotist.
Right.
So, it's very possible he could have been asking leading questions or using the power of suggestion to create this narrative. But it all started with Jim recalling the events, and then the other 3 people that were there agreed to undergo the hypnosis because of the light. So the light is the one thing that I think we can rely on. It seems like everybody, even they all remembered the light, and even the guy who's saying the abduction didn't happen, he also remembers the light. So the fact that the light is there, it makes me think the sighting was real. Whether or not the other stuff happened, I don't know. But to make things worse or better, I guess, depending on which way you're leaning, Jack and his wife, Mary, they both claim that they have since been abducted again in their home in Vermont. And on one interview, Jack showed the bottom of his feet, which appeared to be burned, and he said it was a result of the abduction. So to me, whenever, like when, what's her name? I think her name was Linda. The woman who's one of the first witnesses to the Mothman, when she said that the Mothman frequently visited her afterwards, like, that just makes me be like, I don't know now, kind of. And that sounds like what Jack's up to, because he doesn't remember it, and then all of a sudden he remembers it, and they're like, hey, we're going to abduct you again because you remember it.
But isn't, like, people being re-abducted kind of commonplace in alien abductions?
Yeah. But it's not so much that the re-abductions happen, it's the fact that he remembered about it, and now they're coming back. He's like, oh, I remember that I was abducted 12 years ago. And then the aliens come back. Like, oh, he remembers. Let's go. We got to get him again. Like, where the fuck have you been, bitch?
Right. And even after all this, they've already passed the polygraph.
Yeah, but if they underwent hypnotic regression and they were led to believe these events happened, then they would have passed the polygraph. Right.
That's true.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I guess it all comes down to, I don't know if there's recorded sessions out there of the hypnosis. If there is, I would like to hear them to see if leading questions were being asked.
Right. You'd figure that they would videotape that, and that would easily
But again, it's an amateur that was doing it, so maybe they didn't.
Possibly. I mean, if these people were going to try to use it to prove their case, I'm sure they would have asked for it to be videotaped, and that would have easily exposed to any type of leading questions. I'll do a dig for the Sally Jesse Raphael appearance, the Unsolved Mysteries episode, and I don't know. If it was on Unsolved Mysteries, I think I almost remember it. I think there has to be some footage of there.
Yeah, there might. A lot of the old Unsolved Mysteries are on YouTube, so it might even be out there.
Yeah, no kidding. Dude, I just found all 3 for the first 3 seasons of Sightings.
What? Where? Hell yeah. I loved that show.
So yeah, I think they might have had a sighting, and they might have tried. It just sounds like they just try to capitalize on the sighting. And I mean, we come across that so often in early UFO stuff. there's so many fraudsters when it comes to the paranormal field. I was watching some clip the other day to where this psychic was being interviewed on the news, and they asked her if they can test her ability, and they showed her a picture of a little girl, and the psychic gave this long spiel about how the little girl had drowned. The little she had gone missing, and nobody found her because she had drowned. And she went on for like 20 minutes about this long thing, and then the reporter, she's like, "That's me." So charlatans have always been part of the thing. And it just seems like they may have had the sighting, sure, but it just seems like one guy got cold feet, and then saw them get some traction and then wanted back in. I mean, Sally Jesse Raphael at that time, that's a pretty big show, man.
To me, I think that it was likely they all had the sighting, and then Jimbo had the head injury, which caused him to have this false memory of something. So to him, it was like a recovered memory. And then they all underwent hypnotic regression. So then they all actually believed that this happened because that's what came out through the hypnotic regression.
And they took the polygraphs first before the hypnotic?
No, they did the hypnotic regression first because that's how they all remembered, was through the hypnotic regression.
Right. Okay, yeah.
So that's, to me, I feel like they're kind of all, I guess, victims, for lack of a better term. Like they're all, I think that they believe what they're saying. Like, I don't think that they're being false with their claims. I firmly believe that they believe what they're saying. I do not believe 100% that this actually happened. I will buy the sighting, absolutely. But the abduction claim, I don't know. I'm still out there. And the one thing that really gets me with it's a double-edged sword with the sightings, with the reports, because they're all so similar. So either you've got a bunch of people just feeding off of the same story, being like, yes, that's what happened to me as well, because that's what happened to him, or you've got a bunch of people that are actually experiencing the same thing. But which one is it?
Right.
It's probably both.
Yeah, too much mud in the water in this case, man.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, I mean, the last I heard of it was the story on Unsolved Mysteries, where everybody was in agreement, and this was just another unexplainable case of possible abduction. To hear people, one of the dudes getting booted because he's a fucking mental danger zone, you said, or what was the term?
A mental disaster area.
Yeah, that's not good, man.
Yeah, but also that could just be someone talking shit who is getting shit talked about them.
Right. It's a great way to discredit somebody who's going to say you're a liar pretty soon.
Yeah. Dude's a mental case.
Yeah. He was cool when we were homies, but now he's insane.
But, I mean, they all turned on him. So either he's telling the truth and they're pissed off about it, or he's pissed off at them and talking shit.
Yeah, that's a strange one.
Yeah. But, I mean, the experience sounds fucking terrifying regardless. Like, if, imagine you didn't go through, that you didn't actually go through it, but you believe you went through it. Just imagine that fucking terror that you live with. And it was for something that didn't even happen. It was just a memory that was like almost implanted in your brain.
Yeah, that's scary. That's why I would never go to a hypnotherapist. My dad had that whole past life hypnotic therapy thing, and the only thing he could say about it is that he was really under, he was asleep, so he doesn't know what transpired. He can only go by what this person told him happened when he woke up.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just what it is. They add fancy words to regular hypnosis and like past life and all that shit, and all of a sudden people believe that stuff. I mean, it could be true, but I mean, like,
yeah, maybe, but also maybe not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, knowing my luck, I'd go and they'd be like, all of a sudden I wake up thinking that I'm a masturbating chicken.
Right, yeah, exactly. Anytime I hear a car horn go off, I'll try to vigorously stuff my wallet up my ass.
Yeah, you just start cock-a-doodle-doo while cocking your doodle-doo.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.